Almost a minute later, let's do the first paper test. Newspaper. When the paper is pulled in, we have a good draft. With my stove, you have to prime the pipe because there's a good 2.5 foot run horizontally before it goes up the chimney. And if you don't prime it, you'll smoke your house out. So if we pull the baffle forward, we have access to the pipe. Let's see if you can see that. Pull it forward a little bit more. Well, that's a lot better. There's a damper in there. So we might say, well, let's just check the draft. And the flame is, to a degree, being pulled up the pipe, so oh, you're ready to go, right? You're ready to start a fire. No, that draft isn't nearly strong enough for that 2.5 foot run. You'll see when it gets strong enough. So we have to warm the pipe. Take a piece of fire starter here, let that get going for a bit, and then throw it in the pipe or put it back in the pipe to warm the pipe. This stove is great. This stove is a grate because it's a coal or a wood stove. Just about 30 seconds in, the draw seems pretty good. It's pulling the flame back through the pipe and then up the chimney. But still, if we start a full raging fire now, the house will get smoked out. You can tell when it gets really, really aggressive and the pipe is really warm and ready to. So about a minute more, the flame is really being pulled aggressively along the pipe for about 2.5 feet and then up the chimney. Probably could get away with lighting the stove now, but I just want to show you using newspaper when the draft really gets aggressive. You can tell when you're ready. Other than that, you risk smoking your house out. Another minute. It's really being pulled now. I think we'd be fine if we lit it. Still want to get it a little warmer. Almost a minute later, let's do the first paper test. Newspaper. When the paper is pulled in, we have a good draft. Hey, it's Matt. Sorry, no more video. The back-end discussion here will just show a few images and just talk through all the details. Now, remember, on my stove, the pipe comes out the back, and it's a good 2.5 feet. I mean, that's pretty long. I couldn't get the stove into the fireplace, the old fireplace. I couldn't get it any closer for a few reasons. And when you have more than, a 15 or an 18-inch run, sometimes you do have to warm the pipe. Make sure your chimney is drawing, not just a little bit, but aggressively. Or when you light the fire in the stove, you can easily smoke your entire house out. If you have a reverse flow draft happening, which is a worst case scenario, it will blow into the house. In this case here, what happens is the cold air, there's so much cold air in the pipe, and that chimney goes up. It's a liner, a stainless steel liner inside the brick masonry chimney. It's just dead air, just heavy cold air. So if you go to light a fire, It doesn't want to come back into the house. It just doesn't want to go anywhere. You could put a match up like I showed you to the pipe, and the match is drawn in. And again, a lot of people would think, as I said in the video, that, oh, there's enough draft, and there isn't. It's moving very slowly, and as you get higher up, the cold air can get even like heavier, just not go anywhere, and the whole system backs up, and you smoke your entire house out. Now, you don't need, typically for a 2.5 feet horizontal run, you saw how warm the chimney got and how it just sucked that paper in like a rocket stove. You don't need that, of course. Once you get that, I mean, of course you're good to go. You could tell just from the little square, the little fire starter, how aggressively that little square was being pulled. And the square is enough to get everything moving, just to get that liner or that chimney heated up just enough to get everything moving quickly. So when you light your stove, it's going to move quickly enough to exit. And then when you light the stove, there's so much heat, of course, that pipe will heat up inside of 30 seconds. So most people complain about my stove doesn't work, or when the chimney system is 90 to 95% of the success of the system. People on YouTube complain that they open their wood stove door and smoke comes out. Well, most wood stoves are not made so you can open the door when there's a raging fire burning. They have a baffle that pushes everything forward. You're not supposed to be able to open the door. There's so much confusion out there on YouTube. You don't open the door if you have a wood stove. You wait until it gets just coals and you add more wood. You don't have a problem with your stove if you're complaining about the stove. But if you have, again, a lot of stoves, wood stoves, where the pipe comes out the back, they're very much under or in the fireplace. So that horizontal run is only 12 to 18 inches. It's not a big deal. In those cases, you rarely have to prime the pipe. Always a good idea to put a match in and make sure that draw is going the right direction. But if you have more than that, priming the pipe is very important. And if it's a big masonry stove of brick, it's essential. A couple other points related to this picture. I have access to the pipe out the back through the inside of the stove. Not everybody will have that. I just have one of those ceramic fiber boards as my baffle that kind of covers the pipe and pushes everything forward. They're good to 2,000 degrees. I can just slide it forward and then I have access to the pipe, as you saw. But if that's not the case, some stoves you don't have access to the pipe from inside the stove. Another thing you could do that would work even better is it's a horizontal run of 2.5 feet into a T connector. And the bottom of the T connector, you can see it's like a stainless steel silver piece, not black stovepipe. The bottom of the T comes out. So when you chimney sweep all the soot, you can remove that little silver piece at the bottom, remove the bricks. If I remove those bricks, it would still hold. I was just being safe, and you just pop it out. You could build something with bricks. You could build a brick box instead of those 4 bricks that are there. If you build a brick box underneath the T and remove the stainless steel silver cap, you could put in a little door, like a clean out door for a stove, and you could build a little tiny fire with a few newspapers and twigs in your little box, in your chimney there, and then all the heat would rush up the chimney and get everything moving. And even though you're not heating up that, in this case, that 2.5-foot run, there'd be so much movement up the chimney, it would be no problem whatsoever. It would just draw immediately. So that's another thing I thought of. But as long as I have easy access to the pipe, I'll just throw a little fire starter back there. I'm not going to use newspaper. I was just showing you how aggressive it gets when it's ready to go. You don't need to use newspaper unless you think there could be a problem. You haven't lit the stove for years. It's 5 degrees outside, so you can't afford to have a problem. Then it's good to really warm up the pipe. You don't want any issues. If smoke, if it's 0 degrees outside and smoke gets in the house, what are you going to do? Open the windows and doors? I mean, I've been there. It's not fun. It's not fun. So the newspaper test is always that final, and you can see when it's ready to go. It just goes whoosh, and it looks like a rocket stove, and it just gets sucked up, and then you're ready to go. Everything then is moving through the pipe at I don't know. Sometimes even it seems like 10 to 15 miles an hour. I don't know if it gets that fast. The fact that it's lined, it's like a tube, a liner, a 6-inch tube goes all the way up. That'll move much faster. These American chimneys are built wide And it's just the designs are horrible. A pipe, a 6 inch or an 8 inch pipe, is always better for draft. It moves much faster through the small pipe. In a masonry chimney of brick, they're so wide, all this ice cold air is just sitting there. Who knows how much it weighs? It's hard to get all that moving. Again, this is a picture in the stove. The baffle there would cover 95% of the pipe. I slid it forward. It's the ceramic fiber board, good to 2,000 degrees or so. Pieces that big are about $30 to $35, and it's fragile stuff. I mean, people use it to make rocket stove risers. It's pretty fragile. If you knock it or step on it, it'll break. But it works. This stove, it did not have it's supposed to have a metal or steel baffle, but it didn't have it. This stove is old, very, very old. Not used much when I got it, but built in the 90s. So I keep everything. I keep the pipe exposed when I go to light the sticks and everything. I keep the pipe open just to make sure the draft is good, and then it doesn't. The smoke does not come out into the house when I add wood, so I can just kind of reach in and just slide the baffle down, so that hole then is covered up, which then the gases and the flame is then pulled forward toward the camera, toward the glass at the front of the stove, up and then out, instead of going directly out. If I kept it like this, it would not be good for the pipe. It would overfire the pipe. It would get too hot. But I start it this way, and I just slide it back, and it covers about 95% of the hole. So the flames and hot gases they hit the baffle, which is on an angle, and they're pushed forward into the glass, pushed forward towards the person standing in front of the stove, then up, around, and out. Like I mentioned, most stoves do have this sort of a baffle, and it's on an angle to push everything forward. So when it's raging, nobody can open the door of a stove like this with a baffle that pushes everything. It's supposed to push everything into the glass. If you open the door, it pushes everything out in the living room. People think they have a problem with their stove. Now, there are some older Fishers and Kodiaks and different old stoves from the 70s and 80s and 90s that don't have a real big baffle and nothing is really pushed forward. And some of these aren't even glass at all. They're just old iron stoves, and you can open them up. Sometimes they even have a screen for ambience. You can put a screen in, but they're not built like this. If you have a baffle that angles right up, and many of these stoves, the baffle at the top of the screen you can't see as it angles up. There's only 3 inches or so between the top of the baffle and the top of the glass. So, of course, if you open the door, everything's just going to rush out into the room. There's nothing wrong with the stove. All right, I guess that's about it, guys. Thanks.